Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're looking at research that is going to fundamentally shift how you approach large tasks. Whether you're, planning a massive infrastructure megaproject, launching a brand new tech startup, or honestly just trying to survive a home-kicking renovation, the principles of success and failure are remarkably universal. We're drawing on an incredible database of over 16,000 global projects to uncover the actual science of getting things done. We're going to break down exactly what separates the triumphant successes from the catastrophic failures, and how you can apply these proven frameworks to your own life. Let's jump right in. There's a massive number in the research that's going to completely change how you view big projects. 91.5%. Researchers actually call this the iron law of megaprojects. Out of thousands of projects analyzed all over the globe, a staggering 91.5% of them go over budget or over schedule, or sometimes both. Just think about that for a second. If you start a major project today, statistics say it's almost guaranteed to spiral right out of your control. And we aren't just talking about giant government bridges here. This applies to IT system upgrades, rolling out new product lines, and even your house extensions.
Okay, let's dive into this because the reality is actually even starker. Just a tiny, barely visible 0.5% sliver represents the projects that are a complete success. And by complete success, we mean they come in on budget, on time, and they actually deliver the promised benefits. That means the other 99.5% fail in at least one of those three absolutely crucial categories. This beautifully illustrates that this massive failure rate, it isn't just a streak of bad luck happening around the world. It is a systematic problem. Basically, it's not bad luck. It's bad psychology and bad planning.
So what does this all mean? The crucial question here is why? Why do we almost always fail when we try to build big things? I mean, we're an advanced civilization, right? We've literally gone to the moon. Yet we can't seem to build a high-speed rail line or launch a municipal software system without it turning into an absolute financial disaster. Well, to find the answer, we have to look closely at the data from those 16,000 projects and really contrast the ultimate disasters with the ultimate successes. Let's consider Jorn Utsen's Sydney Opera House. It originally started as this magnificent but totally untested doodle. Because they rushed straight into construction before figuring out the actual engineering, it took 14 years to build and went a staggering 1,400% over budget. It literally ruined Utsen's career. Now, contrast that tragic story with Frank Gehry's Guggenheim Bilbao. This is a radically complex, titanium-clad masterpiece. But Gehry did something entirely different. He built a complete digital twin model in software first. He virtually tested every single piece. And the result? Delivered on time, and remarkably, 3% under budget. The stark difference between those two iconic buildings gives us the golden rule of this explainer. Think slow, act fast. This is an empirically proven framework for success. But here's the catch. It requires us to totally invert our natural human instincts. Usually when we get an exciting new project, we want to act fast, right? We want to break ground, write code, swing hammers immediately. But the most successful projects do the exact opposite. They spend years in a slow, meticulous planning phase. Because when you do that, your execution phase becomes incredibly swift and smooth. You actually speed up the total project by slowing down the planning. So how exactly do we think slow? Well, it starts with a concept called right-to-left thinking. Imagine a standard project flowchart. The box on the far right is your final destination, your ultimate goal. The problem is, most failed projects start way over on the left with the what. Take a couple named David and Deborah from our sources. They decided to renovate their kitchen and immediately started picking out ranges and cabinets, the what. But they never stopped to ask why. Were they cooking for large dinner parties? Did they just want a nice sitting area? Because they didn't define that rightmost box first, they ended up with a piecemeal disaster that just didn't fit together. Always define your ultimate goal first and then design backward. Once you have that final goal locked in, you enter what's called the planning laboratory. A perfect example of this in action is the Pixar process. When Pixar makes a massive movie like Inside Out, they don't just write a script and immediately start animating a $100 million film. No way. They start with a minimal concept, then move to a storyboard. And here is where the magic happens, the iteration loop. They create cheap, rough versions of the movie, test it with audiences, literally tear it apart, and then rebuild it. They do this 8 or more times before a single final frame is actually rendered. They fail cheaply during planning, so they don't fail expensively during execution. Now, as you're trying to plan, you are inevitably going to run into a massive psychological trap: uniqueness bias. This is that dangerous, maybe even slightly arrogant tendency to say, but my project is completely unique. And sure, maybe you're building a novel piece of software, but at the end of the day, it's still a software project. When you convince yourself that your project has literally never been done before, you completely blind yourself to the massive wealth of historical data out there. You sideline past human experience and proven technology, and that directly paves the way for monumental and totally avoidable disasters. Now, what's really interesting here is what happens when we fall for uniqueness bias. Researchers say we get locked into the inside view. The inside view looks only at the highly specific details of your project, your team, and your resources. And honestly, it almost always leads to biased, wild optimism. To actually succeed, you must adopt the outside view. The outside view forces you to strip away those unique details and categorize your project simply as one of those. It's just another kitchen renovation. It's just another subway tunnel. By doing this, you can look at the actual historical data of how long one of those usually takes. Turning that outside view into an actual, reliable budget requires a very specific 5-step playbook called reference class forecasting. First up, identify your reference class, let's say kitchen renovations in old houses. Second, gather the data. Go ask 20 friends what they actually spent. Third, calculate the mean average for cost and time. Fourth, identify your project specifics. Okay, maybe you really want those expensive granite countertops. And finally, adjust sparingly from that average. This process literally rips you out of fantasy land and anchors your budget to hard, undeniable reality. It's an absolute game changer for project accuracy. And this brilliantly illustrates why just trusting a simple average isn't enough. Welcome to the terrifying reality of fat-tailed distributions. Most people assume project risks follow a standard normal bell curve, where extreme disasters are incredibly rare. But the data shows that project management is actually a fat-tailed world. Catastrophic outcomes, like going 400% over budget or taking a decade longer than planned, are actually quite common. You cannot just plan for the average, you absolutely must proactively identify and mitigate these extreme tail risks. Because these catastrophic black swans, they aren't just random bad luck. If you really look at the data, they're highly predictable. At this point, you might be wondering, but wait, what about creativity? Doesn't all this planning just kill the magic? Well, let's look at the Jimi Hendrix myth. Hendrix famously built Electric Lady Studios in a state of absolute unplanned chaos, with just some rough drawings and a whole lot of pointing. And it became a legendary, creative masterpiece. But listen, this is pure survivorship bias. We only remember the chaotic projects that happen to succeed because, let's face it, they make fantastic rock and roll stories. The hard data reality proves that 80% of projects run on chaotic optimism fail entirely. True creativity doesn't thrive in desperate chaos. It thrives in the safe sandbox of rigorous planning. So you've planned slowly, you've defeated your cognitive biases, and you've got a tested, robust digital twin. Now you must act fast. But remember, a brilliant plan is still just a piece of paper. To execute it swiftly, you need what the sources call a single determined organism. This basically means that even the greatest blueprint in the world is going to fail if the team executing it is fractured, inexperienced, or fighting amongst themselves. You need a highly unified, experienced group moving together with absolute focus toward that final delivery. Creating that single organism requires some absolutely crucial organizational psychology. You need shared goal clarity, meaning everyone from the CEO right down to the site worker must know exactly what that rightmost box is. You need trust building and transparent communication. But most importantly, you need aligned incentives. When London built Heathrow's Terminal 5, they didn't just hire a bunch of separate contractors who only wanted to maximize their own individual profits. No, the client put everyone under one shared risk and reward contract. If the project won, everyone got a bonus. If it failed, everyone took the hit. They successfully turned naturally self-interested competitors into one relentless collaborative delivery mechanism. Which brings us to our final concept, and a bit of a challenge for you. What's your Lego? The greatest mega projects and the most successful startups scale up efficiently by using modularity. They break massive, intimidating goals into small, standardized, repeatable blocks, literally just like Lego. You don't build a massive server farm from scratch. You build one highly optimized, standardized server rack, and you copy it 1,000 times. So as you look at the massive projects in your own life, how can you break them down into modular, highly planned, deeply tested blocks? Find your Lego, think slow, and I promise you, you're going to be able to act fast. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.